you very much. I'll try to quite briefly take you through the chronology of how KPF's practice in China has grown, or how it established itself, and how it's progressed since about 1994. And in part, it's following in the footsteps of the gentleman who just spoken. The bank project of Bruce's in Luzhou district was one of the most beautiful when we arrived on the scene, still is. David's work, of course, holds up a lot of our work. And the Portland project was very much the kind of destination for everybody in Shanghai when we first went there. In fact, the taxi drivers it was the only way we could really communicate with them to tell them how we should get to our site, because it was right next door to Hodong. And so that was sort of a geographic term in a way. About 1/4 of our work, you start to see the globe there, but imagine those blobs represent continents. About 1/4 of our work is today in China and surrounding countries, but China is the dominant area. The first project which took us to China was very much, came to us through a roundabout manner. The first wave of our work really started in Hong Kong and in Tokyo. So these were overseas Chinese and Japanese, but much more Western influenced Asian markets where experienced developers were starting their work in Shanghai. And this red circle is drawn around the Portland Center, Shanghai Center, and around Plaza 66, which, when it was in the ground, looked like this, which gives you a little bit of an illustration of some of the challenges that David Scott just talked about, the tremendous, the soupy subsoil conditions, the cross-lot bracing, and the weak rebar, which at a certain point threatened to displace any concrete that might be poured in amongst these what looked like almost an agricultural scenery. Projects or parts of projects which we would have executed in steel, we were not allowed to because very local codes. One district in Shanghai, one fire marshal told us that what would be very acceptable at 40 meters in the air had to be completely fireproof and therefore had to be concrete. The finished building, this is our first building in China, is still, I believe, the tallest building in Puxi, in the older part of Shanghai. And right next to the Portland Center, which you see peeking out to the left-hand side. And the building is a mixed-use project. We were very proud of the tower, but it's actually the retail portion of the building which is probably the best known because of its Louis Vuitton store, which is sort of the holy grail of Chinese retail, that particular brand, and will drive entire projects from a development point of view, whether LVMH will come to one of the other building complexes. But we found that just as the Portland project was very much of a pioneer and had instructed and educated and trained a whole generation of engineers and architects, that we too could make tremendous progress. This is the top of the lantern of Plaza 66. And a very ambitious Hong Kong development house, Hang Lung and Ronnie Chan, I think managed to vault across a couple of the barriers or frontiers of what then was local practice. And then followed a second tower. These are projects that involve a tremendous amount of capital and determination on the part of Hong Kong developers who outlasted or got past the 1997 Asian financial flu, and with their determination finished multi-stage buildings. So that was Pudong, or Puxi. In Pudong, a project for another overseas developer, for Mr. Mori, a Japanese developer with whom we have already done a significant project in Tokyo, Foamy Hills, is now the tallest building in Shanghai at close to 500 meters, to be superseded by the Gensler Tower when it comes up. And you see the Shanghai World Financial Center on the skyline. And you see it next to the Jinmao Tower, which had come perhaps 5 years earlier, just a bit shorter and a very different architectural expression, but nonetheless making this sort of tower in the park environment of the Pudong-Luzhou area, which is so antithetical in its planning principles, as Bruce pointed out, to the traditions of Shanghai and Puxi. And here's a bridge which occurs. It's the highest occupiable space in the world until the Burj Dubai apartments are occupied up in the 490s, New York Pike Other projects in Pudong, this represents perhaps the second wave of work. After working for these overseas Chinese developers and Japanese developers, we began to get projects with bona fide Chinese mainland developers, this one a small developer named Mintai. And yet we were able, we believe, to do some pretty adventurous work with companies that were less familiar with the kind of construction techniques and development strategies that we're used to. This is actually a spec office building, quite a simple, rational building in contrast to some of the exuberant forms which are prevalent in Shanghai. And then another project with, one could say a local developer, but also with a base in Shanghai, in Hong Kong. This is the Shuiyan Group's double hotel project in Xintiandi, which is just about finished. And you see the sort of knitting together of the fabric of low-scale row houses and the Communist Party headquarters, the first Congress meeting, which makes this sort of holy ground, compared to the sort of bric-a-brac framework, exterior wall stonework of, that's out of board, of this project. So this is just about complete. And now for us, the third wave of work which we're involved with in Shanghai. That is the next round of Hong Kong developers putting up 2, 3, 4 million square foot complexes. This is right across from, or diagonally across from the Shanghai Central Development Project. And it's a Shangri-La, Carey Properties, double hotel, 2 different brands with an office building, a significant amount of retail, and subway entry. So in Shanghai style, it's a mixed-use project, but unlike many large Shanghai projects, it's not a large sort of podium base which then consumes some larger buildings that sprout out of a large podium. Instead, the base is dissected in such a way that the public space and the street runs through the project. So a little bit more in the mode of Rockefeller Center, as we know, the street and the grid, or in this case, the kind of knitting together of more random streetways, which define then the ground plane of the project. And if one goes through from Nanjing Road, which is the major sort of retail thoroughfare of Shanghai, through the main atrium space, Galleria space, which is sort of the indoor version of, in this project, the Rockefeller Center promenade is to Rockefeller Center here. One emerges, you can see in the diagram here, in the little dark red box in the foreground, out into a central space where a house where Mao Zedong lived for perhaps a couple of nights. In his youth, maybe just before he went to the Communist Party Congress meeting in the early 20s, if indeed he was there. But that makes the sort of holy grail of, or one of the Communist Party, then surrounded with its expression and realization of the dream of a great Hong Kong capitalist, Robert Kwok. And this project has been underway in the ground for a couple of years. And as in Shanghai schedules, that's about what it takes to do the excavation, cross-lot bracing, exploding the beams, starting over again with the slabs and so on. If one looks at the amalgam of our work, KPF projects, in Pudong alone, so this is about half the work that we've done, either built or in construction in Shanghai, it occupies in the New York City context. We've stuffed them together in those sort of manila-colored buildings in the center of New York, or stretched along in a line that would stretch from the Empire State Building to Central Park. The last couple of images before we finish, our way of working, the way in which we managed to complete the work in China, our beginning with Plaza 66 was with one man, one KPF project manager, seconded to the owner for 3 years and living on site. Since then, starting about 10 years ago, we started a small firm, a branch of our firm in Shanghai, in Xintiandi. It's space leased to us by Vincent Lowe, or given to us by one of our clients. And it's now a 30-person strong office, focused not so much on design, but on the support of the work that we do in New York, to communicate, coordinate, to facilitate, primarily during the construction phase, but now increasingly working with the local design institutes and with our Hong Kong architects also to initiate some of the coordination phases. And the last images of this beautiful little building, which sits at the edge of Xintiandi above the Starbucks, which is kind of a landmark. Just the equipment is Starbucks Ottoman, where's the kitchen around town. But so beautifully narrow a space that we can get light from both sides, and it's sort of the happiest place in our grouping of KPF offices to work, partly because of the work environment and partly because of tremendous optimism and youth of the people who work there. Many of them 3, 4, 5 years out of Tongji University and other great educational institutions in China, and each one of them running, in a way, their portion of a large project. So for a young architect, it's such a tremendous place to work, and it gives us all energy when we visit from New York. It gives you a little story of